Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, Mr. Jeng.
Good afternoon, Council.
I hope that you had a good lunch. So may I just remind you that you're still under oath?
Affirmative.
I'd like to clarify one point before we move on to your arrival at Yundum Barracks. When you use the term slammer, what do you mean?
The jail incarceration.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
So just to continue, at this point, we're on the Wednesday when you were arrested, put into a vehicle, a convoy. It stopped at your house where you undressed, wore civilian clothing and handed over the military uniform you were wearing. And then you were taken to Yundum Barracks, is that correct?
Affirmative.
And I want to make sure this is clear for the record. Were you told why you were being arrested?
No, I wasn't. Other than the utterance I had from Baba Imane that we must be under an illusion or out of our minds if we thought that we, Wall of Boys, will be able to stage a counter coup.
Can you tell us what happened when you arrived at Yundum Barracks?
Upon arrival at Yundum Barracks, I was handed over to, I may be wrong with the rank, but the head of the military police at the time was one Jase. Whether it was a Sergeant Jase, but the first name eludes me, I can't remember. But I was handed over to him, and he requested that I should submit a statement. Initially, I inquired from him what statement, and he said I should give account of my activities and movements from 22nd July to that very fateful morning.
Who did you give the statement to?
I was given a piece of paper to write this statement, and I recounted my activities, movements, the point where I was appointed secretary, to the point where I was arrested, the exchange that transpired in the vehicle, and the signed statement was handed over to Jase personally.
And do you recall what part of the military Jase was from?
Indeed, Council, he was a military police, which was an outfit of the Gambian National Army.
Following the statement that you gave, what happened next?
I was briefly requested to wait, and I think there must have been consultation because I saw him speaking over the phone. Who was at the other end, to whom he was communicating to, remains mystery up to this day. But when he hung down the phone, he gave instruction to the same party that brought me there that I should be taken to the Central Prison's Mile 2.
So do you recall how much time you spent at Yundum Barracks?
It should not be more than 2 hours within that time frame.
Did you observe anything in particular during your time at Yundum Barracks?
Well, the usual movement of military personnel. And again, at the time, I was pretty focused on pretty much preoccupied with preparing my statement.
When you were taken to Mile 2 prisons, was that during the day or was it still daylight outside?
It was bright daylight, yeah. It was daylight.
Can you tell us about the journey from Yundum Barracks to Mile 2? What kind of vehicle were you taken in, and where do you recall any other individuals who were with you?
The mark and mate, I cannot remember, but it was a Jeep 4x4 vehicle. And I think it was a composition of 5 vehicles. I was in the middle. There was a lead car, 2 of them in front and 2 at the rear. And the personalities that I mentioned again, it's only 2 that I can still recall. That was Warrant Officer Alpha Ba and the non-commissioned officer Baba Imane.
From your recollection, were you the only person who was being taken to Mile 2 during that period?
Affirmative.
When you arrived at Mile 2 Central Prison, what happened there?
When I disembarked, alighted from the vehicle, I was escorted, and this time joined by personnel of the Central Prison. Now the names I don't know. A lot of water has passed under the bridge, but I was escorted to a special section inside the prison, which I later came to know as the maximum security wing, number 4.
Can you describe the security wing to us? When you arrived, what did you notice?
When I arrived at the entrance, it was on the lock and key. The main entrance gate was open. I was ushered in, and immediately I realized that the wing wasn't empty, that there were already inmates, and I was ushered into a cell, and I just hear the clank of the lock, and that was it. But I could remember, upon my arrival, I could not recall who recognized me, but somebody mentioned that Jeng is here, and I could hear Assistant Inspector General of Police Chongan shouting my name, and there was a cliche he used, Dogo, and then I answered. He said, well, I don't know, but we were expecting you here. We knew you were going to come here. But, you know, that was just the jokes and the initial banalities that we exchanged.
When you arrived at the Mile 2 prison, were you told what you were being arrested and detained for?
No.
Were you asked anything? Were you given any information?
No. When I entered the wing, all they did was my belt was taken away from me. I had a wristwatch, which was also taken away, and I had a silver, gold ring that was also taken away from me. So basically, I entered there with my, I don't know whether it was sandals or whatever, the trouser and the shirt I was wearing, and that's it. But I was not informed of any infraction or the actual reason why I was arrested and being brought to the security wing number 4.
Do you recall the number of the cell where you were put in?
I've been making reflection last night as to whether there were 30 cells there. If it is 30 cells, then I should have been in number 25 or 26. The situation is such that, honestly, there are certain things, not only certain, a lot of things that I sometimes wish not to remember even as far as Mile 2 is concerned. And it's one of those that I had even forgotten my cell number. But it's either 25 or 26, which was home for 18 months.
That's perfectly understandable. In terms of the first few hours when you arrived at Mile 2, can you tell us about that time? What happened after you were put in your cell?
You begin to conceptualize and internalize your current fate and predicament. Is this really you? And you know, thoughts are very discriminative. You cannot condition how you want to think. But you're preoccupied with reassessing yourself as to what have you done? And I was really trying to understand this declaration or statement that I had from Baba Imane, that is it truly a fact that the Wolof boys wanted to overthrow the junta? But then probably what I can also quickly highlight here is that immediately Assistant Inspector General of Police Chongan shouted my name. It was followed by mentioned of other colleagues like Mama Cham, Pacha, Malik Njai, also raised their voice, and I happen to know that they were there. And this begins now to form the jigsaw of this utterance of Wolof boys that probably this is the brush that was used to paint all of us, and we are now all present. So I begin to make sense of the utterances that I had from Babai, that these were the Wolof boys, and we were all now rounded up.
So just to be clear, you highlighted those names because those are individuals that you were with at State House a few days before. So you knew that they had only been recently taken to prison. Is that correct?
Yes.
Can you tell us, how long did you spend in Mile 2?
A period of 18 months.
Did you stay in Security Wing number 4 throughout that period?
Indeed, I have never been moved from my initial place of incarceration. I remained there up to the period of my release.
Was it true that the Wolof boys wanted to stage a coup, to your knowledge?
The answer is no. I am not aware. But what I can state is that maybe our voices were heard a lot because most of the discussions that were taking place, particularly suggestions and insinuation of the need and requirement for transitional period were being advocated by us.
So I want to focus on the 18 months when you were at Security Wing number 4. Can you tell us a little bit about the prison conditions at Mile 2 that time?
It's beyond description, but I will attempt to paint a picture. A desolate area, a very sad, sorrowful, and pathetic area, in that you are locked in a cubicle, measuring 1 by 6 meters. 1 meter, if you open your arms, 6 meters the length. There were 2 bricks walls, and a plank of wood was placed on top of it, which serves as a bed. There was no pillow, and there was no blanket. You had a chamber pot, the usual plastic buckets, where you respond to nature call. And in the morning, the guards will come and even look at your position where you are in the cell before they hurriedly open the door, remove the chamber pot, close again, pour it, and bring it back for you, and lock again. And then you had a plastic bottle, usually engine oil, the bottle. Is where they put water for you also to drink. It's not even properly cleaned because sometimes the smell and taste of the oil is there. There is a metal door, and atop a grill, open spaces, tiny bits, but with no mosquito netting. And you also have a small cavity called a window, again without mosquito netting, which serves as a passage for mosquitoes at night, because Central Prison is situated within a swampy area, so it's full of mosquitoes. But one can even deal with the mosquitoes because you are in a position to fight with them by flag in your hand or something. But the thing that one cannot or was unable to tolerate is the aggressive rats that have breed a colony there that would visit you at night. And if you are not careful, they will lick your toes. And I know boys are boys, men are men, and you know, sometimes if you are not carefully and jokingly, a colleague drops the head of a fish by your door, that night you will have good company of rats visiting you. But it was part of an outlet of surviving also, and we make fun sometimes out of each other. But the place was not fit for human habitation or accommodation. This also leads me to the diet. Believe me, the food would not even qualify for animal feed, not to talk about for human consumption. In the morning, you are given what they describe as porridge. But this is not coos that they use to make the porridge. It is the chaff from the coos that they mix, and you have to eat it for your survival. Lunchtime, we're given rice and fish. But then again, it's so horrible that when you look at the food, you don't know whether it's mbahal or benachin. You only know that something has been done with the rice, and bonga fish is put on top. You could literally even see the guts on the fish, the scale on it, because it's not properly processed. And I know my wife would be listening to me. She's hearing this. They know that I don't eat bonga fish now. And if you prepare benachin, it depends on the manner it is prepared. I know I just ate it now. After a casual look that qualifies it to be benachin, and I can eat it. And up to this day, I don't also eat sardine, because I have had fair share of my sardine for 18 months eating it. That if I smell the sardine, I'll throw up. In the evening, we're given chere. And the chere is full of sand. Sometimes we even wonder whether it's a question that the quantity was small, so they added sand there to make sure that we can all be fed. So you even prefer taking the chere dry so that you can clean it up and add sugar there and eat it. So that was our diet. Not to talk about the total lockdown, because if my memory serves me well, I think I got there in July, almost 6 months to 8 months, 6 weeks, we were under lock and key. You are not even allowed to step out of the cell. And I think there was briefing also to security guards that they should be careful with us because we were dangerous. Because they gauge you when they come to do anything with you to your cell, they look at where you are positioned in the cell before they attempted to do anything. So this was the life we led, and this is how we lived.
When you say that you were confined for 6 to 8 weeks, I take it then that you weren't allowed to take showers, for example?
No. You are not allowed to take shower. Unless you do it in your cell. Whether it's that plastic bottle of water that is provided to you, and that cannot even wash your feet, not to talk about. If you are not careful and you run out of water at a certain time of the day, forget it, because it's only the next morning when they come that they will refill, because you have no recourse of calling a guard to say that I am out of water, can you replenish? So shower was a luxury, and it was out of the question.
So 6 to 8 weeks confined in your cell. It may be an obvious question, but I take it that you weren't in communication with your family.
Indeed. No communication whatsoever. We were secluded and we were banished. We were crucified and we were forgotten. And in fact, I will be bold enough and say unequivocally that we were non-existent. Nobody cared.
How did you cope during that period?
You know, our God is merciful. He created the human being in such that you have inner resources and inner inspiration that if you have the know-how and the understanding, you will rely on survival coping mechanism and instincts. And this is what prevailed and what made it possible that I am here before you today to be able to talk to you.
You mentioned a few names of individuals who were also detained in Security Wing Number 4. I just wanted to have a fuller picture of the people that you recall.
I will start it from the personnel of the Gambia Police Force. Inspector General of Police, Pasala Jane. Deputy Inspector General of Police, Assistant Inspector General of Police, Ibrahim Chongan. Chief Superintendent Sharif Mbai. Superintendent Ali Undur. Chief Superintendent Turo Jaune. ASP Keba Diba. Superintendent Jame Konta. Inspector Anthony Correa, and my humble self. These are the ones that I can remember from the police. And from the military, as far as my recollections can serve me, you have Captain Mamadou Sonko. You have Lieutenant Sharif Gomez. You have RSM Babukar Jeng. You had Captain Samsidin Sar. You had someone, I don't remember the name, Alaji Fai. You also had Mbalo Seidi Khan. You also have Lieutenant Kante, who testified here yesterday, Alaji Kante. You had Captain Bell Winsil. You have Captain James Johnson. You had Lieutenant Yankuba Drame, who is the current Deputy CDS, if I'm not mistaken. You have Captain Mamad Cham, Captain Dur Cham, Captain Kambi, again, even Ibrahim Kambi. You also had the then former Director General of NISS, Keba Sise. To the best of my ability, these are the names that I can recall. And I think this would be pretty much close to the occupants or the inmates. Yeah.
You mentioned that for 6 to 8 weeks you were confined to your cell. What changed after this period?
Divine intervention. The turning point was first when the Red Cross Secretary General at the time, I forgot the name now, Senghor, came there. I don't know whether he came with other officials of the International Red Cross, but when he came, we noticed some little changes. But as far as my recollection can serve me, the biggest change was when we had a visit from the bishop. I forget whether it was Bishop Michael Clary at the time, who came to visit. And I would like to indicate that when this happened, we saw a modicum of relaxation in terms of the restrictions that we were facing. We even got magazines and books that came from the church. And this really touched all of us. But I will not shy to mention that we were equally disappointed. Disappointed for the fact that among the people that were detained, there were only 4 Christians. Captain Ben Wilson, Captain James Johnson, Anthony Correa, I must forget the other person, but if only 4 people could spur the bishop to come to, of course, I know that the bishop did not only come for those people. Even if that was the case, his mere visit brought about a lot of change. I'm quite sure when he came there, it was not only for these Christian colleagues and fellows, but for the good of all of us, and we saw the good. And the discussion at the time was, where are our Muslim brothers, the imams, the religious leaders, and they were nowhere to be seen up to the day that we were released, and it was really a disappointment that, again, in my view, we shouldn't allow religion to dictate governance, but the reality is that in our setting, religion plays a very important part and role, and they can ensure that justice and order is brought to bear. So in as much as you want to see that divorce from politics and governance and religion, in times of crisis, the best institution that is placed to mediate and bring about order and sanity is best placed with religious leaders. And my characterization is that we were failed by the Muslim Council, or whatever name you want to ascribe it, unlike what we saw with our Christian brothers. But the visit of the bishop herald positive changes that we live to cherish up to this day today.
You mentioned that you were there for a period of 18 months, and you weren't charged during this period. Were you given access to a lawyer? Were you ever taken before a court?
No, but before I answer that question, you also ask whether during that period anything happened. Least I forget an interesting and important development that occurred on the 6th of September.
I was going to come to that, but if you want to preempt it, we can deal with it now.
Okay, then let me go back to as I indicated, I was not initially told what I did wrong. But I cannot put a time frame to it, but I know that there was a commission, a panel, or whatever you want to name it, that was instituted by the AFPRC, which I want to believe was even led by Justice, is it Obayang, or I don't know. But the name sounds like that. I know he was a Nigerian judge, and the composition of the panel was personnel from the Gambia Police first. They were led by Gonel Bah. I forgot his rank now. He was supported by the late Commissioner Jata Balde, ASP by Nyasba, and I think at the time it was Inspector Ibrahim Acham. There were also members from the National Intelligence Agency, but the names I don't know. But they set up an office in the yard, and we were singly told to report to them, and they requested statements from us. I remember when I went before the panel, I took aside Banyasba, who at the time I thought was a colleague because we were all at the headquarters. And I thought that the fact that he also entered the police as a cadet, that we had some similarities, and we could share information. And I blindly trusted him. So I called him aside, and I told him that I need his guidance on twofold. The statement I'm about to give, do I indicate that I still have some of the draft of the reports and minutes that I was taking, placed in a briefcase in my residence at Latel Kuda Jama? Or is it possible that for safekeeping, once they are done with mile 2, he can go to my father asked him to open my bedroom in order for him to take the briefcase and hand it over to my elder brother. And he knew my elder brother at the time. He told me, no problem. I will ensure that I will collect that briefcase and give it to your brother. 10 minutes after our conversation, I was summoned by Gonelba, who indicated to me that it has come to his notice that I have he painted a picture as if that was the end of the world, that I have sensitive material in my accommodation. This will form part of the panel. They want to see this. And how come I was in possession of those documents and all whatnot? I said, relax. There is nothing hidden about this. Maybe you didn't know. I was secretary to the council. How can I do my secretary work if I don't keep draft? Besides, this is secured in a briefcase on the lock and key. He said, regardless of that, he's going to provide an escort to me to go and to bring this briefcase to him. The same episode repeated itself, the ugly scene of the escort again going to my residence, soldiers taking position, threatening me that if I attempt to escape, I will be gunned down. I went inside. Of course, the whole family were crying at this time. My bedroom was open. In front of them, I told them, look, this briefcase has been here since my arrest. It's under lock and key. This will show you how secure it was. It was collected. And in fact, I opened it before Ganelba with combination to reassure him also that there was no one who had access to. And it formed part of my interrogation by the panel members. Stupid and irrelevant question as to how I became in possession of those documents, and I have explained again the role that I have played, and whether that satisfied them or not. I indicated how I became in possession of those draft documents, and I submitted my statement. And that was the last I also heard anything about that panel. But even during the process of providing my statement, I was not even told still what I have done. If that answers what you inquired about that.
It certainly does. I have a couple of questions. Do you recall when this panel was composed?
I don't know whether this was 6 months down the line. Honestly, I don't have true recollection of the timing.
And when you were escorted to your home in order to retrieve these documents, were your parents present?
They were, and other family members, in addition to the neighborhood all being there as onlookers, and there was again mayhem and pandemonium because people were crying and sympathetic, and but at least in as much as it was not desirable, I think it brought about a glimmer of hope to family members that I was still alive and kicking since they've seen me at that material time.
When you provided the briefcase to Gonelba, what happened to those documents, those drafts?
I really don't know. But I would just want to believe that they might have been handed back to the council members. because you could tell that that panel was a sham, and the composition and the team members also, their character, their behavior was also nothing to write home about. I classify them best as enablers. That's all. So I will not be surprised if they hand that back to authorities in State House.
You mentioned that the panel, the proceedings happened in the yard. Which yard are you talking about?
Mile 2, I think they were using the reception room.
And did the panel explain what its mandate was?
This is one of the reasons why I say it was a sham, because I doubt whether they had clear terms of reference. Maybe they were just told that there are some subhumans in Mile 2. Go and get some statements from them, because we were not regarded as humans by oral standards. And to my dismay even, and I will explain this later, but whereas you were conditioned to even work with the junta, which I don't think it was a crime, because we need to distinguish between the service one renders to the country and being an enabler or spoiler by aiding and abetting the regime. These are two distinct things. If your work requires that certain people are alleged to have done something, you are part of a panel tasked with trying to find out the truth. You could not say no when you were selected to be part of that panel. The least you can do is exhibit professionalism in the work that you do, but not blindly over rubber stamping a dictate of do best to find them guilty. And that is how I would characterize that panel. They were not the least professional in the manner in which they approach that work.
I'm sure we'll come back to the issue that you've just talked about now. Can you take us through the events of September 6th and tell us what happened? Referring to 1994.
There was no one in the security wing. Each and every one of us had phobia for keys. When you hear a key and a door opening, you don't know what's going to happen and what will be coming. And especially if it occurs at a very odd hour, ungodly hour of 1 a.m. in the morning. We hear the main door, the lock, the door being opened. I think even half of us were asleep at that ungodly hour. But you could hear footsteps and soldiers marching. And suddenly we had visitors. And it turned out to be the entire junta except Lieutenant Yaya Jammeh.
Can you name them, please?
Again, based on seniority, they were led by Sabali, Sana Sabali. Edward Singate was present. Sadibu Hydra was present. Yankuba Ture was present, and a non-council member, Edward Singate, Peter Singate. whom I understood just returned from studies or whatever. The others I cannot tell because these were non-commissioned officers junior, so I don't know them, but these personalities I know very well because I've interfaced and worked with them. They came in, or they were the ones that visited us.
Can you please tell us what happened when they arrived?
The first person they asked for was, where is Captain Mamad Cham? And at this time, they were accompanied by some prison officers as well. And names I cannot remember, but I think it was the deputy or the acting or whatever, and to say he was there, that much I know. And he led them to where Mamad Cham was. Mamad's cell was open. He was handcuffed behind and was requested to crawl.
Do you recall who requested him to crawl?
It's either, I don't know exactly who, but it's either Edward or Sana. But this is not something that someone told me, because my cell was positioned at around 25 or 26, and Mamad was further down this side on the other opposite row. So when he comes out of his cell, there is no way that he can pass through that narrow corridor without me seeing. And I was standing by the door. I could see what was happening. He was kicked, hit with rifle butt, and taken out of the immediate wing. Then we had shots of volley firing out, and we all entertained the idea that he's been shot dead. They came in again and inquired where is Assistant Inspector General of Police Chongan. Similarly, he was handcuffed and was asked to crawl. This was accompanied with kicks and assault with rifle butts, and he was taken away. We also had gunshots and presumed that he was also summarily executed. They came back again and said, where is Jeng? And mistakenly, and to say he was walking towards my cell. But when they saw my face, they said, no, it's not, it's RSM Jeng we are talking about. But RSM Jeng was placed in a cell that was by the entrance. He was taken away. How he was taken away, whether handcuffed or what, I couldn't tell, because this is not within my immediate line of sight. So I couldn't tell, but again, he was also taken away. And we hear gunshots, and we thought also that his fate was decided. After that, we could hear that this is enough for today, and they were going to come back the next day to continue.
During the time when they were taking out detainees and hitting them and shooting in the air, did you hear them say anything? Do you recall anything in particular that they said during that period?
No, I did not hear any exchange, but I know that among the lot, Edward Singate was more brutal than any of the others. And all of them were drunk. They were all intoxicated. And I don't even know whether they realized the magnitude of what they did and what they were doing under the disguise of alcohol.
Why did you describe Edward Sonata as more brutal than the others?
Because I personally saw the manner in which he had kicked both Mama Cham and Chongan whilst they were crawling. And, you know, the pathetic bit about it is that you handcuff somebody, his hands are behind. I don't know whether the legs were also tied. And then you expect that individual to crawl. How? And I could recall Chwangan saying, "How can I crawl?" They said, "Just roll like a snake." So virtually he was crawling with his belly. Yeah? You know, he will make a cover space by, you know, flunging himself with his belly and then moving like that. And this was accompanied with kicks and assault with the rifle. And again, this was a pure act of cowardice. You see, believe me, in the animal kingdom, there is some semblance of order, and there is also a modicum of regard for each other. If this is possible within the scope of animals, how much more human beings? You incarcerated people who have done nothing wrong. They were helpless, defenseless. You could come in the middle of the night drunk, armed with a firearm, and literally abuse these people like that, then you are subhuman. Then you are subhuman. As far as their conduct and behavior is concerned, they are not even fit to be called human beings. They are subhuman. They are not even animals. I know we are all animals, but upper animals, but they are in the lower scale of that classification. It just beat my imagination that someone can be as malice, coward, and anyway. But a very regrettable night, and it left a lasting impression and impact. I am now relating to it the next day when if you drop a pin, you could hear this sound because it was very quiet. People could not even talk to each other. We were gripped with fear. And I know that the statement that I gave you, I have deliberately indicated that there was a colleague who lost his sanity. And I have mentioned in my statement that because of respect for the family, I was not going to call his name, but I think the cat has been let out of the bag yesterday. This happens to be Samsudin Sir. I am knowledgeable about this because I was supportive to him when he lost his mental capabilities. I will be holding the food, and it will be a Dr. Njai who would be feeding him. And I think this went almost for a week. That just shows you the gravity and the degree of the trauma that event has left on people. A very sad day. And I don't know where they are, but I know all of them would be keenly listening to these proceedings. Let them make a reflection of their activities, their conduct, their demeanor, and what they did that night, which they thought would never ever be revealed. There is a day of reckoning, and it is right now. I don't know whether enough forgiveness would be enough, but I can tell you that it has left an indelible mark in my head here that I may forgive, but I will never ever forget the night of September 6th, which we have dubbed as Night of the Terror.
After what happened that night, one of the things you were told by the members of the junta who came there was that they would return.
Affirmative.
Can you take us through the following days and weeks after that, just to give us a sense of the mood and how you felt during that period?
You felt dejected, lost hope. The reason for life and living, particularly when you just think about the fact that 3 of your colleagues have just departed this world. In the most horrendous and barbaric way, as we saw. And you cannot forgive yourself that you couldn't do anything to support and assist them, but you were helpless. You are full of remorse. To some point, even you question the essence of life and living. And especially what was even much more inundating was the fact that you were living on borrowed time, because they told you they are coming back. You don't know when. At least at one point, you would just even advocate that, let them just come and do it, and then you are history. But then living in that perpetual suspension, that it could be today, it could be tomorrow, it could be the next day. These people are animals. They are.
When did that feeling that they could come back end?
I can only speak for myself. That ended the day that they were brought back as a result of the arrest and detention of Sana Sabali and Sadibu Hydra. At least there was huge sigh of relief when we saw colleagues that we thought were dead, were massacred, buried and forgone. It rekindled a lot when we saw them alive, and to some extent brought back some kind of sanity to your person by seeing your colleagues that you thought you will never ever see them again, that you let down, that you couldn't help, and you know, for a moment, it was a nice feeling to see them back again, that they were alive.
I note the time, so I just want to ask you a few more questions about your time at Mile 2. Do you recall who brought in Lieutenant Sanasabali and Sadibu Haidar, second lieutenant?
I peeped through my window, and I saw that they were escorted by Edward Singate, and the only other soldier that I could recognize was Alhaji Martin, who was among the group. But the rest, I don't know. But I saw that the two of them had their hands bound behind their backs, and Edward was vividly present, and I could also remember Alhaji Martin.
Do you recall which security force Alhaji Martin belonged to, as well as his rank?
He was originally with the tactical support group, but he's been absorbed now by the Gambia Armed Forces, and I think he is now the current Inspector General of Police of the Armed Forces.
What was his rank at the time?
Well, when I last saw him, during my brief stint at the State House, he was an inspector with the tactical support group at the time.
After Second Lieutenant Sanasabali and Sadibu Haidar were brought in, did anything happen to them?
Well, intermittently, we knew that they were subjugated to I could imagine if we lived in the condition that we live, much more now than besides the intermittent tortures that were meted on them, because sometimes we are in our cells and you could hear them shouting and crying due to the severe pain that they were subjected. And it was clearly evident that they were even electrocuted during those torture sessions.
Why was that evident?
Because the noise that you hear, them crying, is not as a result of just beating like that. And we later came to understand that there was a colleague, I could not recall the name, but I think he mentioned it even in his testimony here, that he himself saw the machine when it was being brought in, and we build relations, again, over time with some of the guards. Not all of them that were bad. I had cultivated two good security guards that were useful to me. They were the ones I used to send home when I need money or when I need provisions. And they've been very supportive in meeting with my family and running some of the errands for me. And we do have conversations, and they open a little window for you and let you be aware of what is happening, particularly with those two other colleagues.
Following what happened to Sana Sabali and Sadibu Haidara, did you notice any impact or any change in them?
Well, there was even insinuation that Haidara died as a result of this. I think he's a brigadier general, if I am not mistaken. But I could not conclusively say that, yeah, that's the rank, but that's what I thought. I don't really know.
Can you tell us about your release from prison?
You know, subsequently there was relaxation in terms of our conditions in the prison, because later on we were allowed to come out of the cell around 8 in the morning, and I think up to 12. Then we go back, they open us around 2, and then we come back around 5 o'clock back into the cell, awaiting for the next morning. I cannot remember the precise, but I think it should have been a few days before Christmas that I completed the second break and I was locked in. That was the last lock-in, looking forward to the other day, that my name was called, and Major Maling Jai and Mbalo Seidikan, that we were supposed to report to the reception. And while we were going, we were also instructed to collect all our belongings. And when we got to the reception, we were greeted by the then Inspector General of Police, Jibril Juf, and the then Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces, Babu Karjata, where we were told that we've been released. And I was taken home, transported in the vehicle of the Inspector General of Police, me and him alone in the car. And Malik Jai was, Major Malik Jai was taken home by Babu Karjata, who was the Chief of Staff at the time. And I remember on the way going, Mr. Jibril Juf, the then Inspector General of Police, gave me a brotherly advice that now we are released. I should be careful who I talk to and what I say about the conditions in that place, because you never know who you will be talking to and where that information will finally ended up. And that I was also required to be reinstated back to the services. Then he later took me home, and when we got home, he mentioned this thing to my parents, and he left. This was on a Friday.
Before we come to what happened after that, you spent about 18 months at Mile 2 prison, and you've told us that there's certain things about your experience that you've blocked out. Can you just tell us a bit about what impact this experience has had on you and your family?
I remember the first night. Even though now I was privileged to to lie on a cozy bed. I was gripped by guilt. Here I am with my freedom, but I was so guilty that I have left other colleagues behind. I am not the kind of person who glamorize or sensationalize issues, but I was even reluctant to sleep on the bed because of guilt, knowing the individuals that I left behind, the condition they are still in. You also struggle with your sleeping patterns. Here you are now with your freedom, you are in your abode, but anytime a door is open or closed, it triggers sentiments and some visitations of that horrible place still comes back. And regardless of the fact that you even go and take a proper shower, because traditional settings, I went to the sea to cleanse myself, you know. Now you have the luxury of using sponge and taking proper shower and facility of deodorant and all whatnot. But for some reasons, the smell of that place still lingers psychologically. You still want to believe that that stench of that horrible place is still with you. Not to talk about even when I was, whenever I passed through mile 2, subsequently, 100 meters before reaching mile 2, I block my mind. I don't really want to look in the car, just to make sure that I don't even look either my right or left to be reminded about that place. This guilt, remorse, even though you have your freedom, but the mere fact that there were colleagues that you had lived with, shared things in common, unless everybody was free, you were not free. This perpetuated for a very, very long period of time. And I think it only improved a little bit when we finally became aware that there was not a single individual that was left in mile 2, as far as the original group of people were concerned. I was not married at the time, but it was incumbent in me to let my spouse and my children be aware for history and for posterity. I had briefed them, informed them of what happened, who did what we went through. And I would even say that the impact was even more on them than me, even though I lived it. but they were really touched and traumatized with the accounts of what I gave them. But of course, over time, we hope they will heal, as I am also still in a healing process. And I think the only good that my incarceration gave me is that if I have the basics that I require, I can stay in a room for 1 week, 2 weeks, and I'm not bothered with the outside. It has become part of my psyche and my being. That's perhaps the only good that I could say had come out of that incarceration.
Mr. Jang, I note the time. We have less than 10 minutes, I believe 7 minutes now. I just want to ask you to give us a brief overview of your career after you came out of prison. And then I would ask, with your permission, that we submit your statement, which captures certain institutional reforms that you're recommending for the police. So I will give you a chance to identify the statement, and then we include it in the record. But for now, if you could just tell us a bit about your career, just a brief overview after you were released from prison. Your microphone.
Yeah, just, I will try to be as brief as possible because of paucity of time. When I was released, I was told to report, but I have already made my mind that I was not going to report. And I recall Monday morning, I went around to greet my parents, and my dad reminded me that I was supposed to report to police headquarters. That was directed by the Inspector General of Police. Am I going? And my answer was no. He asked me why. I said, I am not the kind of person who will be detained for 1 year, 6 months, only to be released, not told what you have done, and only to be called back and say, go back and continue with your work as business as normal. So I'm not going. He then asked, what are you going to do? I said, I will pack my bags and go back to UK. And he said, when you go to the United Kingdom, what are you going to do? Then the realization dawned on me that that is going to be a wrong choice. Wrong choice for what? I had spent 7 years, almost getting to 8 years in the UK, doing my studies. There is no kind of work that I haven't done in the UK, ranging from cleaning toilets, selling in fast food chains, Wimpy's and all whatnot, printing T-shirts. I've done it all to survive and be able to meet my educational challenges. And I consciously made the decision in 1993 that I was coming home. I was no longer going to continue doing these menial jobs. Now, with this realization that I said I'm going back to UK, even though I had family there, 2 brothers and a sister, going back to UK to do what and for what? Prompted me to say then, it's the wrong choice. Let me go back to police headquarters and hear what these people have to say. And before I move on now, just a quick one, I also want to correct an impression or perception that it is not everybody, as it was painted, who went back to work was a sellout or did it out of desperation. No. This is our country. It did not belong to Yaya Jammeh. It did not belong to the junta. It belonged to Gambians. And it was a realization that I couldn't go back to Europe to do those menial jobs that I have left behind and come back. If nothing, I had more than choices against a lot of people of what I could have done. But I decided to go back to work for my country. And time would not allow me why I said that it was even good that I went back, because I went back as a changed man, and I was not among those officers who would be bullied by small rats because they have affiliation with the APRC, or because of their tribal affiliation or not, who would even tell an Inspector General of Police, you need to do this, and they do it. I have other colleagues, they are around, they are hearing me. I used to stand and say that most of you here now trying to show who you are and what you are not, when it was required to shape this country, you were either under your bed or you went to hide. Only now that everything has come to fruition, with all what I have gone through, 1 year, 6 months in jail, I now have come back to my work with a belief and a direction. You cannot sway me, and I don't care when you go even and tell Yaya Jammeh that I am apolitical. And I was apolitical. I am proud to say this. I wish time would have allowed us to digress more on that, but it was a blessing that I went back to the police. Time didn't allow. I went back to the police. I was made staff officer to the Inspector General of Police. Shortly, I was sent to Nigeria to do my police command course. I came back from Nigeria, got promoted to superintendent, and in 1999, I decided to go for my master's degree. That is when I went to the Royal Military College of Science, that is now the United Kingdom Defense Academy, and got my master's degree. And actually, I am proud to say that in the history of the security forces in the Gambia, I was the first individual with a master's degree serving in the police. I'm not blowing my trumpet, but I'm just trying to allude to the fact that it was good that I went back to the police, and because the dividends were there. It was not easy also going back to the police, because I had aspirations of also going for peacekeeping to better myself, improve my financial status, but more importantly also widen my horizon in terms of learning from what happens and what is applicable in the international field. But anytime there was a peacekeeping mission, the most recent was Sierra Leone when they wanted people. My name was on the list, but a good number of Inspector General of Police did not want me to go because they thought I was important and vital to remain and shadow the responsibility of the police administration. So my colleagues were going and coming, and that became my life until I served a very diligent, honest, and God-fearing individual called Ibrahim Anjai, who became an Inspector General of Police. He saw my plight, and after discussions, I told him that I would like to go on peacekeeping. I had a good team that I was working with, and I can tell you that in my absence, they are ready to shoulder the responsibilities of the administration of the police. He accepted and agreed on this, and in 2004, I was made to lead a contingent of 29 people, including myself, as the contingent commander. I got to Liberia in 2004. My first appointment was team leader for the recruitment of the police into the new Liberia police force. I did that for a few months. I was moved to team leader as non-compliance, investigating acts that constitute human rights violation by law enforcement personnel of the Liberia services. I was later moved to executive officer in the operations department and served as incident commander on major incidents before I was made the chief of staff of the entire United Nations police component in Liberia. It turned out to be that the police commissioner, who was an American at the time, was moved to New York headquarters as the new police advisor. I had worked with him closely. He saw my work, and a month to the final 2 years of my peacekeeping, he gave me a call and inquired whether I was interested to take up a position of planning officer and a team leader in the Department of Peacekeeping for the transitional planning from the African Union to the United Nations operation in Darfur. I gladly accepted the role, and I was given a P4 position, and I moved to New York for 1 year. And time will not allow me, but again, there was a lot of things that we have done when we were in New York in terms of things that will benefit the police, but you know, I will wrap it up. I did 1 year in UN headquarters. I was returned back to Liberia, this time around as a special assistant to the new police commissioner. I was in Liberia again from 2007 up to 2012. Before I was offered another position in Darfur as first field security coordination officer, which I did for 6 months. Then I was moved to policy and plans unit, responsible for promulgation of standard operating procedures, drafting policies, concept of operations, and the like. Which I also did for 3 months before I was made the Deputy Security Advisor responsible for the entire administration of the UN security in Darfur. Subsequently, in 2017, I was moved now from DPKO to the United Nations Department of Safety and Security, as again Deputy Security Advisor in the Israeli-occupied territory of Jerusalem, of Palestine and Jerusalem, and I'm now currently working in Israel, Jerusalem, as the Deputy Security Advisor. This did not go without problems. I decided to resign my commission from the police in 2012 because I was inundated, and there was a particular Inspector General of Police called S.R. Baji who was very obsessed of my prolonged stay with the United Nations. I have even heard about stories that my residence was photographed. I was discussions during morning briefings when the police would have got important issues of national security and the rest to talk about, but rather I was being discussed as having stayed too long in the United Nations. I needed to come back home to help in the police administration, and that I had made a lot of money. It is enough. I should come and allow other people to go. But what they lost sight of the fact was that I was not on any Gambian quota as far as my work with the United Nations was. I went through competitive process of technical assessment, written exams. I went through interview, and I got rostered. So, but they were under the illusion that I could easily come home, and then they would just pick another officer and send him to replace me, which was a far-fetched. But because of this insistent and harassment I was going through, to the extent that I was reported to the president that I was disloyal, that I was told to come back to support the police, and I refused to come. And when I know that this has gone far, and I had already done 15 years, which allowed me to go on voluntary retirement, on one of my visits, I decided to tender my resignation letter, gave it to my wife, left here on a Saturday, and told him to drop it to the police headquarters on a Monday when I was far gone. And thank God that when they received the letter, they accepted my resignation, and I severed ties with the... So what this means is that from 2004 to 2012, I was on secondment with the Gambia government. and only started proper with the UN as a full-fledged staff from 2012 to date. In summary, and I wish I could cover a lot, but this gives synopsis of my current career with the United Nations.
Well, thank you very much for that, Mr. Jang. We've gone over the time allocated, so I will cede the floor to the chairman and just ask that the usher give you your statement so that you can identify it, and we will submit it into evidence because you have made recommendations, institutional reforms for the police force. Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, I'll let him identify it and then give you the floor.
This is the statement that I have submitted.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jang. Mr. Chairman, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Counsel, and thank you very much, Mr. Jang, for a very powerful testimony. Personally, you took me through some emotional roller coaster here and there. Some very moving stories were told. One of the things that made me very nervous was when you talked about chamber pot, cleaning it in the morning, God coming to get it. It reminded me of an emotional day we had in South Africa when we went to Robben Island. We spent I went with the Secretary General. This was March 1997. We spent 3 days there visiting with President Mandela. And one of the days, we went to Robben Island, and we were given a tour of the facility. In Mandela's room, which is maintained, was this chamber pot. I have a picture of it in my office next door if anybody wants to see it. There was a white South African who was giving us a guided tour of the facility. He narrated a story about how the prisoners, unlike yours, not that that was a good thing for you, how the prisoners at Robben Island cleaned their own chamber pot in the morning. On this particular day, this prisoner who was giving this guided tour said he had not gone out of his room, his cell, and Mandela then came to check on him. He found out that this fellow had diarrhea. He did not empty his chamber pot. Mandela took his chamber pot, went and emptied it, washed it, and the fellow broke down. There were many people in our team who were crying as well. Chamber pots, so you got a bit emotional at that point when you mentioned that. I think Mandela's chamber pot is something that every African needs to hear about. Anyway, thank you again so much for a wonderful and a powerful testimony. I'll now turn to the commissioners. If you have any questions, please indicate. Commissioner Carr.
Commissioner Carr, you mentioned that whilst you were detained, two junta leaders, Sadibu and Sana, were brought in. Did you have the opportunity to talk to them?
I recall that there was one particular day when the guards there came with an information that Sana and Haidara wanted to call upon us to apologize. This was not received well. There was division as to whether this should be allowed to happen. They were the ones who brought us here, and only now that we share the same then this is the only time now they are thinking about us and wanted to come. There was serious opposition from some quarters, but if my memory serves me well, even in the detention wing, we maintain regimentation. Pasala Jany was the most senior, and he was given that regard and respect. I remember he spoke to many people, indicating that if they really want to come and apologize, it should not be difficult, because now we are sharing the same faith. We are all there together, and it will be good to hear what they have to say. And I want to believe, again, let me be corrected here, that still there was resistance from some people, but I think they managed to interface with few of us and regretted what has happened. But this was not wholesale. There were still some people who were bitter and didn't want anything to do with them, if that answers the question.
Last follow-up question. Were you able to have any information as to why they fell out with the junta, with their junta colleagues?
This is not cast in concrete or in stone. But the information that I have is that it was not true that he put a pistol or attempted to overthrow Jammeh or whatever. The information that I gathered was the fallout was as a result of disagreement on term limit. I was made to understand that both Sadibu and Sana Sabali wanted term limit at one point to hand over, whether this was after 4 years, 2 years, I don't know the period, but my understanding is that their arrest was contingent on the fact that there was disagreement on the issue of term limit.
Thank you. No other questions. Mr. Jing, do you have any final word and advice to the country?
Yes, sir. The institutional reforms I cannot touch, but the first highlight I want to make is that research has shown that every country, every community deserves the type of leadership and deserve the type of police or security institutions they have. It's a choice. I know a lot has been talked about the police. Sometimes we have not helped ourselves. That the police is corrupt, they take bribes and all whatnot. I just want to quickly highlight that, granted, this is true. It's not every police officer who is clean. But I also want to remind the citizens that it takes two to tango. The person who receives bribe and the person who gives the bribe are equally culpable. And we can say no and change our police force. If we are not happy with the way the police is, citizens have a responsibility, because they are the taxpayers who foot the salary of the police officers. But what I also want to highlight quickly here is that security of this country must be given topmost priority. I am aware of ongoing security sector reform. I only hope that the scope would be encompassing and it will not cosmetic surgery, but a real surgery that will remove the cancer that is inside all the security forces in this country. The security forces have been enablers. Yahya Jammeh alone could not have been successful if he did not have enablers. And I also want to remind every Gambian that we are all guilty. We have all failed this country by complicit, by being quiet, and by not doing anything. We have a very serious problem in this country. Average Gambian is stoic. We easily resign to fate that everything that happened is Allah. That's a sin. God gave us brains to think. And those days when manna will fall from heaven are long gone during the period of the prophets. Yahya Jammeh has divided families. Yahya Jammeh has been responsible for breakage in marriages. It was dog eat dog, cat eat cat. And it was only possible because of the enablers, the spoilers, and most often our silence. This has to change if we want to build a country. For the security institutions, there is no single institution that has not enabled Yahya Jammeh. The security sector reform that should happen in this country should be wholesome. Every individual person in the security services must be made to resign your commission. Reapply. Background checks. Be vetted. Before now, we talk about train and retraining. But we should not just use a brush to gloss it up. We are all complicit. I now want to come back to also the public service and the private sector in general. We all need to distinguish between favor and duty. When I walk to an institution, for example, I go to the police to look for a driver's license. The individual that is in the office making driver's license, you are not doing me a favor. I am there to get a driver's license because I am qualified and a Gambian. It's your job to give me a driver's license without me giving you a dime. But it is different. If I come there and beg for something, which is a favor, you may be inclined to say, no, I am not going to do it. But the work that you are paid for, there is a need to distinguish between favor and duty. And it's a problem in this country at the moment. People cannot distinguish between the job that they are paid for, that service they need to render, against favor. I also want to quickly just highlight the indiscipline in this country as well. There is a lot of indiscipline. I will just give a quick example of the conduct of drivers on the road. Sometimes you don't even know whether the road is 2 lanes, one going this or coming this. It has now turned to be 6 lanes. Taxi drivers, private vehicles, 2 vehicles are coming this way, 3 are coming that way. You know, it's a shame. And all is due to lack of discipline. And sometimes we just keep our eyes. If I am in a vehicle being carried by a person, if you are doing the wrong thing, I have a responsibility as a citizen to tell you, look, what you are doing is not right. If you are in a taxi, he is taking the shortcut, tell him, follow the line or else I will not pay you. Then we will begin to see semblance of order in this country. We must strive to build a prosperous country, be able to bequeath something to our offsprings and the generation that are coming. There was a hard-earned freedom, but we must also be very careful to cherish it and not to spoil it. Gambia have decided, and it's true we have decided, that's why we are seeing all these things. But I am now even appealing to Gambians to even say that, let's move away from that slogan of Gambia have decided, because we've achieved that already. Let's now adopt a new slogan to say Gambia first. What do I mean by Gambia first? Everything you are doing, whether I am seeing you, the chairman is seeing you, the council is seeing you, or we are not seeing you, remember that God is seeing you, and do the right thing, and the right thing is work for your country. Work for your country, service to country. I also want to enjoy, especially the security sector and public service and leaders, government, cabinet, or whatever. Let's all try to be apolitical. What do I mean by apolitical? Let the politician do their politics. But if you are a civil servant, do your work as a civil servant, and that is rendering service. Try to do your best to be able to build institutions, build systems, evolve processes and procedures, leave a legacy that one day, if you step out, whoever comes into that institution will be adaptable to those systems and policies that are in place, and we will see a quick turnover in this country. If you look at our neighbors, they have a cadre of technocrats. Governments come, they change, but they remain there. This is why you see the difference in the dispensation. I will also close by saying, I know time, that whether it's perception or passive, but I am a little bit concerned also in terms of whether we are not seeing corruption raising its ugly head again in this country. It might be perception, but sometimes I am alarmed by what I see and sometimes what I hear. Sometimes you even hear people telling you that if you don't take your share right now, then you are a fool. That's a concern. We should put this country first. And the other aspect I really want to touch, I know time is really pushing me, which is I am also concerned about tribal issues. I want to encourage the government even to consider removing the word tribe in all official documents. Let us all be seen as Gambians rather than a Wolof or a Mandinka. I think it will help. We can just take a cue from Rwanda. And examples are abound, but I am just a little bit of concern in the direction that this hard-earned peace and everything that people do, whether right or wrong, they say is democracy. For God's sake, democracy has tenants. And if we live by democracy, it calls for the highest code of conduct and decorum. I just appeal to every Gambian that take a moment, whether it's today, day after tomorrow, within the week, but as soon as you can, 5 minutes of your time, make a sober reflection, take stock, and see what you can change to better this country. This is the only country we have. I am a son of the soil. I want to die and be buried here. And I am also an advocate of leaving a good country for the future generations that are coming. I thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jang. It's very, very kind of you indeed. Thank you all. Thank the legal counsel. Splendid work today. Thank the audience. Thank the interpreters. And also my fellow commissioners. Thank you all, and the secretariat, of course. Can't do without you. But thank you all very much. Tomorrow, 10 o'clock, we meet here again. Thank you. Meeting is adjourned.